Thank you all for coming. Always good to be the first to go. So I'll set the table before we get into the conversation with Brian. But everyone in this room is obviously familiar with GPS, and it's likely that most of you used it in some form to get here today. The U.S. military developed GPS in the 1950s, initially for precision bombing. In 1983, Ronald Reagan made it available for civilian aviation use, and in 2000, Bill Clinton opened up GPS more broadly for civilian use. GPS, which stands for Global Positioning System, is actually the U.S. version of a GNSS, which is a Global Navigation Satellite System. There are 3 other such systems in use today. There's GLONASS in Russia, there's Baidu in China, and there's Galileo in the EU. While these systems are associated probably most often with navigation and mapping, GNSS has a range of applications that center around PNT, positioning, navigation, and timing. PNT is used in ways most people do not even realize. Farmers use it for precision crop management. Our financial institutions and power utilities use it for very precise timing to manage financial transactions and power grid synchronization. Without it, stock market trades and ATM withdrawals would not happen. Telecommunications companies use it for synchronization of traffic between carrier networks. Without it, calls could not be routed and text messaging would not work. And other large industries like oil and gas, mining, shipping, aviation, and even food delivery are reliant upon GNSS. It's a fact that trillions of dollars of economic activity are underpinned by GPS infrastructure today. But despite our reliance on GPS for critical economic and defense applications, the system today is showing its age and its vulnerabilities. A few examples of this. If you just look at the war in Ukraine and the GPS jamming and spoofing that is being done and the impact that it's had, it becomes pretty obvious of the vulnerabilities and shortcomings of the GPS system today. In late 2024, a commercial airliner was downed as a result of Russian GPS jamming. In May of this year, a large container ship was run aground in the Red Sea as a result of GPS spoofing. And this entire system was not designed for the age of autonomy. If you've ever tried to catch an Uber in a crowded city, you know the problem of precise positioning and the challenges around it. So Xona is building the next generation of location infrastructure, a layer of precision and resilience that power the systems that move the world forward. And I'm pleased to have Brian Manning, the co-founder and CEO of Xona, with us for this discussion. So Brian, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess first off, can you tell us a bit about your founding story and what led you to start Xona?
Yeah, so it wasn't just me that started the company. It was a group of us that we all met back at Stanford doing aerospace degrees once upon a time. And when we actually started it, I was at grad school doing an MBA, and I got a call from one of our buddies like, yeah, Tyler's looking at starting a company. And Tyler's one of the most conservative people I've ever met, and also has a horrible sense of direction, ironically. But and so he's like, yeah, they're kind of building like Starlink of GPS. There's a bunch of small satellites. Me being the arrogant MBA, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go prove to them why this can't work. Like, there's no way there's a business here. GPS is free. This doesn't make any sense to commercialize. And so I started digging into it and looking at it. I'm like, okay, this is bigger than I thought. There's 7 billion devices using this out there. And every single one of them is using the free service, and every single one of them would like a premium service, and there's nothing available. And that's when we started realizing a lot of things you mentioned, that it's not just, so Tyler was working at Ford in their autonomous vehicle division, and the reason that he had identified this as such a big problem is that GPS was good enough to support a human driver. And so GPS can semi-reliably tell you what road you're on. Most people have probably seen, like, yeah, it told me I'm on the off-ramp, but yeah, I'm not a big deal. But he was trying to figure out, well, how do you get it to be precise enough and reliable enough that it can actually support autonomous vehicles? And to the point where you have the level of accuracy that can tell you if you're in the middle of your lane or not, but also the amount of reliability that you can actually take your hands off the wheel and have it still guide where you're going. And GPS is just nowhere near where that's at. And so that was kind of the original envisioned use case, but then we started realizing, like, okay, if you can meet that use case and you can provide something that has that level of reliability and that level of, I guess, scalability, that every single one of the demand is virtually unlimited. And so at that point, it's really just a pricing exercise more than it is anything else. And that was about 5 or so years ago, and we've been spinning up ever since. So.
I guess you kind of mentioned that you went through this thought analysis, but here's a product that's used by so many people, millions of people, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of companies. They've gotten this very valuable resource for free since it was made available to the public. What gave you the confidence that companies would pay for a premium service?
Yeah, that's your comment of like, me trying to go prove this wrong. Part of the reason that we kind of joined the company is because I couldn't prove it wrong. And that's where a lot of the founders came. Like everybody tried to prove it wrong. And once we had enough really smart people in the room that couldn't prove this didn't work, like, well, we should probably do something. And so everybody thinks GPS is free because nobody here really pays for it. That being said, everybody that built the devices that you're holding did pay for it. And so if you're Apple, it's not free. If you're Samsung, it's not free. If you're Ford, if you're Mercedes, if you're John Deere, it's not free to any of them. And so it is a free service, but it's not a free capability. And if you look at the world out there and kind of step back a little bit more, that there's about 2 billion new GPS devices that are sold and shipped every single year. And somebody paid for every single one of those. And so for the OEMs, for the device manufacturers, there is say comfortably somewhere between a 10 and $20 billion market for GPS because you have to pay for the chipset. And so for us, if you abstract away everything that we're doing with satellites, and we have this conversation with our customers too, because a lot of our customers view this as being free. So okay, ignore that we're building satellites. If we could give you a magical piece of firmware that would make your GPS device work at 100 times better accuracy, it could make it work indoors, it could make it work with high security, it could solve all the problems that you're having, would you be willing to pay 25 to 50% upcharge on what you're already paying for the chipset? And the answer has pretty resoundingly been yes. I'm like, okay, well, we need to go build a bunch of satellites to make the magical piece of firmware work, but that is effectively what we're selling. And so it's just kind of almost a reorienting people in the market to say like it has been thought of as free for a long time, and that's kind of why it's flown under the radar and let us almost sneak up on it, despite being, if you look at every single space-based service in history combined, GPS has 2 orders of magnitude more users than every other one combined. So.
And with that in mind, and the fact that there's trillions of dollars of economic activity underpinned by GPS and other GNSSs today, like I know I personally had a hard time doing the TAM analysis when we first met you because it just touches so many different industries and the market is so large potentially. How do you think about your TAM? How do you think about the markets you want to go after today versus tomorrow? How big is this opportunity?
Yeah, this was a fun challenge. And so the way that we started by looking at it is kind of starting with the chipsets that I mentioned. Like, how much are people actually paying for a similar but subpar capability today? And then how much do we expect they'd be willing to pay for a better capability? And if the market for GPS chipsets is, let's call it $15 billion, and they'd be willing to pay a 25% or 50% upcharge, then you clearly have a $2 to $5+ billion market right out of the gates. The larger way to look at this, though, is again kind of stepping back and saying the other side. Well, there's legitimately several $1 trillion worth of value that GPS creates every year, and without it, none of these different functions around the world work. And so when you move from in our early stages of what we're building, it's just kind of a better GPS. Our longer term is really aiming at how do we become the Visa of location, right? Where every payment, every transaction, everything around the world depends on Visa, but you don't really see it, you don't really feel it, but without it, nothing is there. How do we become that for location? How do we take that $1 trillion worth of value that's dependent on GPS today and put that, make it basically dependent on us and really be kind of the backbone that powers all these things? And that's, if you look at the technology roadmap, our early stages are more building we'll call it a better GPS. And that is something that I think the TAM analysis of what is people paying for GPS today? What problems can we solve? How critical are those? But that over time shifts into how do we build something that isn't just a better GPS, but it does all the things that you don't even think can be done today. Like, for example, you walk indoors, everyone's like, well, GPS is gone, I guess I'll just meander my way around and find something. Everyone just accepts that happens today. And it's some of the things like that I think in our longer term roadmap, that's not with our stage 1, but later on, when you start to have the backbone that powers that, and imagine actually having the ability to navigate where you are, anywhere, all the time with precision, that's kind of where, if you have $1 trillion worth of value dependent on you, there's several different business models that are pretty effective at that point. So.
And we only have 2.5 minutes left, and we could fill a whole day talking about some of the challenges you have faced or will face, but I guess, what do you see as some of your biggest challenges coming up to really scale this business?
Yeah, so we're at an interesting spot at this point where we for a long time, raising capital was my biggest concern because what we're doing is it's launching satellites. It does take a lot of money to get over that hump. We've been very fortunate to have some great investors behind us, and so at this point, it's really just execution. To be very honest, my current biggest concern is recruiting. That we just are growing a lot. So if anybody knows great people in anything of electrical, software, et cetera, engineering, please send them our way. I know the shameless plug, but no, we're at a pretty good spot right now. We've really overcome a lot of the different hurdles that I've seen on that side, and so it's growing the team and just executing and doing what we've said we're going to do. So.
I mean, this is a huge priority for the government. It seems like I mentioned earlier that you guys were the first commercial company to get an FCC license to operate in L-band. You won the $20 million StratFi. Have you seen government support come pouring in, or has that been a challenge?
It has not. So I'm going back to DC again next week, and we have not had to convince anybody what the problem is. Really, just the conversations there has been, what is your solution, and why is your solution the best one? But yeah, there's through all ranks. I guess when you start to get into the conversations that are not public, it gets even worse. To put it that way. So.
Well, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you for coming by and giving us the quick and dirty on Xona, but very exciting company, and I'm very proud to be investing in you guys.